Good evening. Thank you for joining us on New London Republicans, the party that's looking out for you. Tonight's show is hosted by me, Bill Vogel, chairman of the New London Republican Town Committee. And we have a number of things to cover with you tonight. But I guess I'll just start off by saying, are you ready for spring? We say that almost every show now that we're getting close. But guess what? Next week's show will be on the 4th of March, which is, the next week from Wednesday, a week from today. And we're hitting March, and as you know, March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. So I'm expecting to see those crocuses popping up out of the snow by the end of March, and by then you'll know that things are rolling, and hopefully winter will be a distant memory, and we can get past all this. But we had a tough week last week. It was colder than can be, and it's supposed to snow again this weekend. So who knows how bad that'll be, but it's been a roller coaster ride as a winter. I thought last winter was pretty bad, but I guess I'd have to say this one was much worse. And I guess the only way you can feel happy about the whole situation is just be glad you're not in Boston, where it's so much worse. So anyway, we'll get past this. It'll get over with, and we'll come out of it, and we'll forget it by the time summer comes. You won't even be remembering this winter. So that's the good news. Just a couple thoughts, sort of along the political side of things is I was kind of thinking about, what is it that really should be important to us today? And there's a lot of things, but one of the things that came to my mind is are you really satisfied with living in Connecticut? And are you really satisfied, let's say, with living in New London? Is this where you'd want to retire? Is this where your kids are going to work? How's it going? And I guess I'd have to answer that question by saying not very well. Connecticut has very high taxes, and the governor is looking for more money yet. I mean, it's an insatiable attitude up there in Hartford, where they basically, they want to add tolls to the roads so bad they can taste it. And of course, all that is yet another tax on Connecticut citizens. Maybe you'll pick up a few New Yorkers or a few Massachusetts people along the way, but the vast majority of it will still be Connecticut. So Connecticut's still paying that. Connecticut has a tax almost on everything. It almost taxes you to breathe. So if you're alive, you're going to get it. They have an inheritance tax where money that you save that you already pay taxes on, if you leave it to your children or something along those lines, you end up paying an estate tax. So you lose that. Now, if you go to Florida or some of these other states, you don't pay estate tax. And if you go to Florida and some of these other states, you don't pay any state income tax. So there's in the competitive arena of how much does it cost to live here, Connecticut's coming out on a pretty, not such a good side. Electricity and utilities are higher here in Connecticut. You have a tough winter like we had this winter, so you have a lot of heating and fuel bills. I mean, it just costs you a lot of money to live here. And then if you happen to live in the city of New London, then you're hit with enormous property taxes and what appears to be a administration, the Finenzio administration, that doesn't seem to be sensitive to the fact that the taxpayers have been tapped out for a long time, and they keep looking at, well, we just need more fire trucks, or we need more of this, or we need more of that, and they just keep loading it up like it doesn't matter. But it does matter. We'll talk about the school budget in a minute, which is, to me, totally shows a lack of understanding of what it means to the taxpayers in New London. So it's a tough one. On the positive side, let's see, we pick up a call here. Hello, caller, you're in New London Republicans.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, very good, thank you.
This is Ray calling.
Oh, hi, Ray.
How are you?
Hey, very good, very good. Anything you want to talk about in particular?
What do you think of the election?
I can't quite hear you, Ray. Somehow or another, you're not coming in, the loudspeaker's not coming in. All right. What about the election?
Yeah, who's going to get it?
Well, we'll have the election in November.
Okay, you let me, I hope Reverend Heisler did it again.
Okay.
You know Reverend Heisler? I
I'm
hope
not
he
sure.
gets it again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Ray. Okay, we're just continue where we left off. Is basically what I'm really trying to say is we're talking a little bit about what the pluses and minuses of living in Connecticut and living in New London are, and on the positive side, we mentioned a number of the things that would be a disincentive. On the positive side, maybe a lot of your friends live here, your family lives here, you grew up here, so you know your way around. Maybe your job's here. You have things like that sort of keep you here. The summers are wonderful here. The falls are really great. Winters, can't say much about the winters. And the spring is okay. It's usually we get maybe 1 month of spring, which is May. And so spring's a little bit shaky. So I don't know. It's you have a lot going there now. If you're like me, all your kids, when they graduated from college, they don't live here in Connecticut. They end up getting jobs somewhere else, and so your family, because they have to get jobs, your family breaks up, and maybe you see them once a year, maybe you see them a couple times a year, but it's not like they're next door neighbors and they're going to come over for Sunday dinner. I always look at that movie called the TV program called Blue Bloods. And you have all the family, 3 generations, maybe 4 of the family right there at the Sunday dinner table. And I always thought, well, gee, wouldn't that be nice, But in Connecticut today, in New London today, you just aren't going to get that many generations. You'd be lucky to get, one of your kids perhaps that might live in the state. But by and large, everybody goes because you got the taxes, you got the climate, you got the job environment, which is poor, and those things all working against it. So what's the answer? There's some of the things don't have quick answers, but there is a good answer. It would be to bring more Republicans into your state legislature and to get a Republican governor. The Republicans at least will fight to keep the taxes down and to try to grow jobs in the state so that the kids, when they do graduate from school, will have a place to work. So, and sadly, we have a rather skewed situation where you have a lot more Democrats in the state than you do Republicans, and then you got even a larger group of unaffiliated voters that you could say they don't really want to be Democrats or Republicans. But chances are what it really means is that they're just not really engaged in the political process and therefore haven't really made a decision as to what party to belong to. So I would encourage you to join the Republican Party if you're not if you haven't made up your mind as what to do. And then I'd encourage you, if you have the willingness to join our Republican Town Committee, I would encourage you to run for office, run for City Council, Board of Ed, run for state office. I mean, believe me, as a chairman of a party, one of the hardest things to do is to get candidates to run for office because the pay is not very good. So it's like not at all. And but you got to engage and you got to fight for it. If you want Connecticut to be, if you want your family to be able to stay here, beyond one generation, you really need to fight for Connecticut, and you really need to try to make it a better place to live. And you can really start by getting a strong 2-party system so that one party can't just keep taxing. Those Democrats, like I say, there isn't anything that they don't want to tax in Hartford. And like I said, the tolls, they're mouth watering at the idea of having tolls all over the state to basically raise yet another tax. So anyway, having said all that, we can jump into our agenda and see what we got here today. As it might turn out, the first item I want to talk about is the Board of Education budget. Now, I haven't seen the details of the budget, but I know that I went to the meeting last Monday night, I guess it was Monday night, for the public hearing on the Board of Ed, and heard some of the comments there. Met the new superintendent. He seems to be a really fine, personable person. Somebody that you can talk to and feel comfortable with. So I think that we're lucky to have a person like Dr. Rivera. But having said that, I think that we really got to rein in our Board of Education on this 7% increase. 7% increase is really, really a startling increase for a Board of Ed in the city of New London. If it goes through and translates into an overall raise in taxes, that means at least a 3% increase for everybody in town, just on the face of it. And that's not counting what the municipal side of the budget will come in at. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But this 7%, 10% of it, well, excuse me, it breaks down basically a 6% of it is what the taxpayers in New London will be paying on their share. The part that the municipal covers will go up 6% from what it was before. Therefore, you'll have a 6% increase in the taxes you pay for the Board of Ed, which will be an overall 3% increase because the Board of Ed budget is about half the city budget. Now, the reason given for that is that they got 344 new students coming in. But, amazingly, what's not said is, I don't know, I forget, they told me what the split was, but I heard it so fast, but it was basically a 50-50 split, it seemed to me, between in-district students and out-of-district students. The out-of-district students that are coming in, let's say 150 plus coming in that are out-of-district, that means they're coming into the magnet schools. So the magnet schools should be bringing us money in, not costing us money going out. And so if it was 344 students total, that would be roughly a 10% increase in the number of overall students. Well, it is a 10% increase in the overall number of students. And if they were all in district, then you could sort of see where they're going to have to come up with some more money for some more teachers and whatnot to handle that situation. But what you really have happening with half of the students being magnet school kids, their tuition's paid for by where the district that they're coming from, plus the state gives the city of New London $3,000 for each one of those students. So that's roughly $550,000 for 150 plus students. So that would be more than enough to cover the cost of the tuition for those students will cover what's needed to teach them, and the extra state money that comes in should be enough to more than cover the 150 plus students that are in district. So it's really hard for me to see how they can make the case that because they have 344 new students coming in, that's the reason why they got to go up to a 6% tax increase, a 7% budget increase. The difference of the 1% is that the grants they get, which are about $20 million, are not covered by the local taxpayer or the state. So you do have a situation there where it really just cries out for, why do you need so much money? I do know the teachers have a 1% raise, and I do know that the pensions and things like that, some of those kind of benefits are going up a bit. But still, that doesn't get you anywhere near 6%. I could understand a 2% increase if that's what they had. That's what they had last year. And, it was, people sort of accepted that. If they came in with a 2% increase this year, I think that, they might get a little pushback, but not much. And people would probably accept that. Basically, inflation is probably less than 2%, so people are really not looking for government costs to go up, Board of Ed costs to go up. But nevertheless, if it came in as a small amount, I think it would be tolerated. But for them to come in with a 6% increase in taxes on their side of the budget, it's just really, it tells me that there's a tin ear at the Board of Ed. And I don't think they've done a very good job of describing to make even to try to justify it, other than to say these 344 students. In the newspaper articles I read and the words that I've heard from them, they never mention that half of them are out of district magnet school students. So it's really hard to make the case that we should be paying more money because we're bringing in magnet school kids. That's just the opposite of what's supposed to be happening. So let's hope that situation straightens out. I'm worried that when the mayor, the Board of Ed has to present their budget on the 16th but not later than the 16th of March to the mayor for him to incorporate in the overall municipal budget, which he has to present the first part of April. So it's coming up fairly quickly. So, in a little more than a month, we'll be knowing what Mayor Finenzio is looking at. Now, I would have expected that since Mayor Finenzio has had lots of tax increases over the last 3 years of his term, that he would really be trying to fight like heck to not have much in the way of a tax increase, period, let alone from the municipal side. So I would expect him to try to come in with a zero tax increase on the municipal side and fight like heck to get that Board of Ed budget down to something a whole lot more reasonable, like maybe 2%. So I would expect him to try to come in with not more than a 1% tax increase. That's what I would have expected, given that he's trying to run for re-election. But I have this feeling that that's not what he's going to do. I think he's going to take that Board of Ed increase almost lock, stock, and barrel, incorporate it in, and he has to incorporate it in until the council pushes back. But I don't think he's going to fight that hard on that. And then I think he's going to turn around and hit us with a whopper coming in for all the other things that he has going on, like lawsuits and whatnot. Hello, caller. You're New London Republicans.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
As far as the budget and the increases,
Yep.
they're going to increase it. There's nothing we could do. And the reason the Board of Ed is, the reason the superintendent and the board is going to ask for that big increase is because they can. And the reason I say that is, if you remember, when these budget questions went to referendum, the people voted yes. There is no checks and balances anymore. This mayor will come in and he'll increase because he can. Nobody is stopping him, and nobody cares. There's not enough people in New London to stop it. When we put these questions to referendum and people vote yes, it's amazing, and it makes you wonder who is voting yes. It's obviously it can't be the people that are paying the bill, because I don't know where they think that money is going to come from.
You're absolutely right, caller. Yeah, one thing I hope is that the mayor won't be so disingenuous as to try to put off a budget vote if it's if it's petitioned and goes to referendum. I hope he won't be so disingenuous as to put off the referendum to November again, like he did last time, which is really, really a kick in the eye, kick in the head to the taxpayer. I mean, it should be an August vote. And if that vote for the budget comes in like it should in August or September, I think that the people that come out to vote on that budget will be people that are paying taxes, and I think it'll get voted down.
It won't, and he'll put it to November again because he can. There's nobody to stop him. And I got to tell you, this whole thing about the taxes is the biggest joke going. I went and paid the tax today. It was late, so I don't know who set the rate, but if you pay it late, it's 3%, a month on the late tax payment, which is fine, except I don't know who set that rate. I'm going to make the broad assumption it was probably the city council. But anyways, this is a big money-making deal for the city. They're taking money left and right out of people's pocket, and they're doing it by the tax increases. They're doing it by the referendums. People are voting yes, and it makes you wonder. It apparently isn't. There's not enough taxpayers in New London, because if people were paying the taxes and they're seeing these increases, they wouldn't be voting yes on these questions. I'm not understanding why. I don't understand how they're able to get it through. But he's gonna, if it ever comes to a referendum again, of course they'll have it in November.
Well,
And
I
they'll
hope
do the
not.
same thing they do.
If they do, I think I mean, everybody's going to have to revolt because it really is, it's so, I mean, it's even ridiculous because by November, they've already spent a big chunk of the budget, and then they'll come back and say, well, even if it fails, they'll come back and say, well, we spent more than 25% of our budget, so we can't do
Yep.
anything about it. So, I mean, you just can't do that to that's just wrong.
I agree with you, Bill.
I can't believe he got away with it before. I don't think he can get away with it again.
Of course he will. Because I've been waiting for that revolt to come. The revolt is not coming. It should have came when the dog pound got overspent and there was very little accountability. I've been waiting for the revolt when the police chief is sitting and collecting full salary and benefits, including a college education. There's no revolt. I've been waiting ever since I see the school board. They turn around and even though they were supposed to get, Harbor School was supposed to be closed down because it was too expensive to keep going, and they rebuilt all these new schools. There is no revolt coming. I don't know what's wrong with the people of New London, the ones that are paying the taxes, but they're not standing up and they're not coming out and saying enough is enough. I don't know why, Bill. I hope you can motivate them. I'm on your side on that.
Yeah, well,
But
we're going to have to
right
really,
now,
we're going to have to really push it. I mean, I agree with you.
I agree.
It gets discouraging when you see people vote for those 5 questions last November, and they voted yes by pretty good margins. When all it
Yep.
was is just, basically they were saying, go ahead and hit me in the head, and increase my taxes, and the people went
I know.
along with it.
And I don't know why it's like that. I really don't. I hope you and the Republican Party can come up with an answer. I hope that you get the message out there. But the people of New London are those that are paying the tax bills are asleep at the switch, and I don't understand why.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
But
well,
anyways, keep up the good
unfortunately,
fight.
there's a lot of signs up for sale too, unfortunately.
That's what's going to happen. There will be a lot of that coming next. People will be leaving not only because of the city, the situation of the city, and the waste of money, but also the state. I'm not so sure I disagree with the tolls coming up because they're supposed to affect people coming into the state, not people that are state residents. But I will agree on this. Every time the state of Connecticut finds a way to make revenue, they just spend the heck out of it and then turn around and take more out of our pockets.
Well, you're right about
And,
that.
That's what needs to stop also. So, the prognosis is not good. Just keep getting the message out there. That's all I can say, but it doesn't look good right now.
Yeah, we're going to we'll work it really hard this time.
All right.
Hey, thank you
Good
very
luck.
much, caller.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now. No, it's the point the caller makes is really good. I mean, if the mayor comes in with, let's say the Board of Ed comes in with their 6% increase, and then the mayor comes in with a 6% increase, why then basically we're going to see a 6% overall tax increase, and on top of the tax increases that we've had the last 3 years, and people are just going to, I mean, how many 6% increases can you accept when your property values are going down and your salaries haven't changed? If you're lucky, they haven't changed. A lot of people have lost their jobs, so their salaries are non-existent. So it's a tough problem. We really got to stop that. And what we really got to do is make sure that the mayor doesn't try to hold the referendum in November and then have the out that say, well, I've already spent the money. That is so egregious to do something like that it just really is just kicking the taxpayer in the head, kicking the voter in the head, and I don't think Finenzio can get away with that again when he's going to try to get reelected as mayor. I mean, that'll be just a lot of people would be really upset with that. But unfortunately, I think he in many ways counts on people that aren't really taxpayers to vote him in. His tendency is to try to, mostly. I mean, given that the city's about 70% renters, he's looking at that 70% and saying, well, these people really don't aren't that directly affected by the taxes. They're definitely indirectly affected because the landlord's going to raise their rent, but they're not directly affected, so they don't take the kind of interest in that kind of thing. And so he thinks if he can, use some of his glib, his fancy speech, which, the first paragraph, he sounds like he really knows what he's talking about. Second paragraph, you're not very sure. And the third paragraph, it's just a generality with no substance. So anyhow, yeah, we got to do something about that. I'm led to believe that the Democrat Town Committee meeting last night, that the mayor was not talking about holding the line on taxes. He was trying to justify why he's going to ask for tax increases, and I don't know what the numbers are that he was talking about, but it didn't sound to me very promising that he's going to be our knight in shining armor to try to hold the line and protect people. So time will tell. We'll soon enough know what his budget is. He has to come out with it the first part of April, so we'll see how this all shakes out. Another issue I was going to just mention is on the school side. One of the things that I really tried hard for was for the referendum that the caller and I were just talking about, those 5 questions. One of the questions the caller was talking about was the municipal budget, and people voted yes on that, even though it was a grossly large tax increase, and you would never have expected people to vote yes for something like that. But it's hard to explain. But I think it goes back to the 70% renters because they just didn't understand. But one of the other questions was the bonding. There was a tremendous amount of bonding that the city approved on that referendum, and that bonding all, of course, is future expenses. You have to pay it back every year, just like you do a car payment. So I mean, it's not like you are getting something for nothing. And one of the big bonding issues was the school, the magnet school buildings. Now, the Board of Ed already had approved magnet schools. That was already a done deal. What the Board of Ed was asking for was $168 million bonding to build schools. And that's a good thing if you have to build schools. But the problem was, and to this day, I think it still is, they don't know how much money it's going to cost them to build the buildings they want to build or refurbish the buildings that they want to refurbish. There never was a good cost breakdown. There was never any architect drawings. There were never any project plans. There was never a detailed budget. There was never anything on that. And what they're talking about now is that, and I have to give Dr. Rivera credit. What he wants to do is he wants to have he thinks the district needs let me just see the words here. He wants a master plan for facilities. Okay. Yeah. So he says, as the district embarks on major construction projects to build new middle and high schools and begins to see new district-wide enrollment increases, the superintendent said he wants to make the development of a facilities master plan a priority for the district. Next school year, Rivera said that the district is expected to enroll about 3,544 total students, 344 students more than the current year. Well, what I would say is that how could you even ask for a bonding if you don't have a facilities, an overall facilities plan? I mean, holy smokes. You'd think that would be, basically, business 101, I mean, not to have a master plan for facilities is just, it's just one more, notch saying that, in my mind, saying that it was a mistake to approve the $168 million before any of the plans were done. In my mind, what should have happened there is that as each school and each renovation project got defined, then they should go out and ask for bonding for that particular project and, go forward with it and get state reimbursement and all that kind of thing. And that way they would have a defined cost and they would know what they're doing. But just to come out, out of the blue, they pick a number out of the air, and there you are with $168 million. So again, it's we really need to keep an eye on the Board of Ed. And we probably need to get some people in there that are with a little bit more business sense. We do have one accountant in there, and I'm just surprised that he hasn't blown the whistle on some of this stuff. It actually seems to have been the architect of some of it. So anyway, okay, let's move along here. One of the good news is that the municipal, and the governor's budget, the municipal aid's going to stay the same, and the funds for education are going to stay the same. So that's not in and of itself going to cause a problem for those of us, people paying property taxes. So anyhow, let me just see what else we got here. Okay, just on the governor's budget, the governor, his nearly $40 million biennium budget, $40 billion biennium budget, introduced Wednesday to the General Assembly, includes a slight 0.7% increase in state aid to cities and towns. So in the case of New London, it looks like we didn't get any increase. We got the same as what we were going to get. And let's see if we got anything else here. One of the things, Paul Formica, Paul Formica and Andre Baumgartner are doing a really good job. I mean, these are two brand new guys. I mean, Paul Formica, of course, experienced having been a first selectman. Andre Baumgartner is, brand new at this, and both of them have been really dynamic in participating. In this case, Paul Formica says, "I am pleased that cities and towns across the state are going to have an opportunity to begin where they left off." Senator Paul Formica, Republican East Lyme, said, "That will help cities and towns keep property taxes where they are. Particularly in New London, where nearly half the city's land is non-taxable, municipal aid is an important part of the city's budget." I hope he's right, that we won't have to increase taxes. The governor's budget also maintains the current funding level for educational cost-sharing grants, which is intended to equal state education funding to towns by taking into account the town's wealth and ability to raise property taxes to pay for education. So that's the good news. Let's see. Got a couple items in the back here. Oh, let's see. Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. This is funding for I-95. We'll talk about it in a minute. Okay. One of the initiatives, too, that I think is a good one, and I'd like, if anybody has a different opinion, please give us a call, but a regional dispatch center seems like a pretty good idea to me. It's been in the works for a while, and it looks like people are still trying to make it happen. The towns of New London, Waterford, and East Lyme continue to seek state legislation to set the legal groundwork to enable municipalities to share a regional emergency dispatch center. And legislation proposed by State Senator Paul Formica would allow the municipalities to create their own governing board while keeping dispatchers employed as municipal employees. While there are other regional dispatch centers in the state run by private entities, there are no existing facilities that handle 3 different municipal police departments. We do not want to outsource our dispatch functions, Tammy Doherty said, and she's the planning person in the city. We want to retain that local oversight over an important service to our communities. And so it looks like they're trying to keep that going. It's regionalization is going to be really an important thing. One of the things that you don't see, when I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, the way things I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. The way things happen there is you get, let's say you have a suburb starts developing, and you have lots of, you have people come in and build houses and shopping centers and things like that. Well, when it gets to a certain point, what happens is the municipality, in this case Charleston, just goes ahead and takes over that suburb, lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, it's these county governments, unlike the city governments, are able to do things like that. And what it does is that it spreads out the cost of everything. It actually to me, it's a good idea, because how much better would New London be if Waterford was part of New London, East Lyme was part of New London, and you had the surrounding towns all were actually part of New London. That would be, a home run for I think everybody. Maybe Waterford wouldn't be quite as well off, given that they get taxes from Millstone and Crystal Mall and things like that. They probably wouldn't be quite as well off, but everybody else would be better off. So, it's having a regional setup has an awful lot of advantages. Yeah, you lose some local control, but, if you have a bunch of progressive Democrats in control of things like Mayor Finenzio, you've lost control anyway. So, you might be better off. But anyway, let's move on here. We talked a little bit about one of the things that they're talking about is these historic buildings, and there was a meeting on the landmarks, had a discussion about it, and let's see. New London Landmarks discusses possibilities for post office, lighthouse inn, et cetera. And they're covering a lot of the buildings that are in the city that, none of us know what to do with. They're talking about the city post office could be converted to a small hotel with apartments. The Capitol Theater might find its niche as a cultural center. And the Lighthouse Inn's future could involve a group of wealthy people living together in a style epitomized by the film The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. I didn't see that movie, so I don't know what that means. 5 buildings, including a mill on Garfield Avenue owned by the Ferrera family, and a private home on Pequot Avenue, they discussed. Each of the structures was chosen because of its architectural or historical significance and the possibility that it could be torn down if developers can't be found to save it. No district action plan came out of the event, which culminated in a breakout sessions that allowed community members to help come up with development solutions. The problem with anything like that is if no action comes out of it, then it's probably safe to assume that nothing much is going to happen with it. The good news is it gives some visibility to these problems. The bad news is that unless it's actually taken on by groups of people with money, nothing's going to happen. One of the biggest investments would involve the Capitol Theater on Bank Street. Frank McLaughlin envisions as part of a redevelopment, including the former Marcus and Klingerman travel buildings that could all be worked on together as a mixed use involving apartments, retail, and restaurant parking. You're talking $10 million, but it's within the realm of reality, he said. That's Frank McLaughlin. Ideas bandied about at the forum include potential uses of buildings as a theater, home perhaps to this is the Capitol Theater, home perhaps to the Flock Theater, Connecticut Lyric Opera, Cultural Center, reaching out to the Hygienic Arts and Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition, Education Center, Music Center, and College. With more than 20,000 square feet of space on 2 floors, the building likely would be activated in phases, perhaps utilizing pop-up stores, and interest would be spurred by carving out art studios and offering a tour. Then they go on. They talk about the post office. It revolved around creating boutique living opportunities in downtown, about 40 rooms total, mostly small studio-sized apartments, taking advantage of transit-oriented development subsidies. The idea would be to retain the building's historically significant murals in common areas and perhaps carve out niches for a post office, gym, restaurants, and coffee shop. Then they talk about the Lighthouse Inn, the 1902 Lighthouse Inn. Proposal started with raising the property's secondary building. That's the secondary building, not the inn itself, and included a possible tear down and rebuild of the current main structure, similar to the developers did in Watch Hill, to replace the historic Ocean House as a first-class lodging, dining, and conference facility. Another intriguing possibility was the suggestion that 22-unit co-housing facility could be created on Guthrie Place site. And they go on. And then they talk about the Garfield Avenue And, you know, it's good to talk about these buildings, but, you know, let's hope something can come of it. Let's see. And then they talked about that sort of abandoned brick house on Pequot Avenue, and try to get something going there. And so, you know, I'm glad to see people trying, but what I really would rather see is something actually happen. So we'll see if that works out. Anyway, the problem continues with Chief Ackley as far as, you know, just like the caller was mentioning, there you have a case of a chief of police that's drawing a full salary who's been on a paid leave of absence since July 31st. The mayor's had one investigation as to what to try to come up with cause to fire her. That apparently failed, so he asked for $20,000 for yet another investigation. My guess is that one's going to fail too, because he's going after the wrong type of things. He could have easily, in my mind, have fired her for cause by simply saying the police department was falling, you know, straight down, with having lost 30% of its officers and morale was really bad. I mean, that would be plenty cause for most people to say, yeah, the leadership's got to go. But that's not what he did. She put a lawsuit against him saying he was interfering with her job, and the next day he put her on a leave of absence, July 31st, with pay, and then came up with a list of grievances against her, which sounded kind of weak to me. And apparently he's still trying to get some leverage to try to make that stick. I don't think it's going to stick. I suspect he's going to end up, you know, costing the city money on this whole deal. And it's a shame, because the city's been hammered with these different lawsuits because of some of the incompetence that's happened over the last 3 years. But anyway, we do know that basically Chief Ackley's got to go. I really fault her too, because I know we talked about this last week, and the caller had mentioned that, gee, wouldn't you do the same thing yourself if you were her? Tell you the truth, I don't think I would. I could. You know what I would do is, if I had that situation and everything was stacked up like that, I would try to settle quickly, you know, if there's a potential for settling. And I would go and get another job, because I couldn't stand to sit around and do nothing for 6 months, 10 months, you know, just going on and on. I mean, it's like you're in limbo. Let's get on with your life, you know. Plus, you know, it's embarrassing taking money from the taxpayers in New London and not doing a job. I mean, getting paid for doing nothing is, you know, it doesn't make you feel good. Okay, let's see. Another thing I always like to talk about on the show is, I'd like to mention that this city council needs to raise the mayor's pay. Right now, the mayor makes about $80,000. I mention it almost every show. But if we're really going to get the kind of candidates to run for mayor that we really want to run for mayor, we need to make it possible for somebody that is a professional person to, you know, step out of his job and run for mayor, with the idea that he won't lose too much money. In other words, if you're a successful lawyer, you could well be making more than $80,000 a year, and yet you could be a darn good mayor, and it'd be a shame to lose that kind of a person. Or if you're a senior engineer over at Electric Boat, or you're a scientist at Pfizer, or whatever it is, coming in. And then the other side of the coin is a lot of the department heads get paid more than the mayor does, and that really doesn't make any sense. Like we said, the chief of police making $110,000, mayor's making $80,000. That doesn't make sense. So we need to raise that pay. Another issue I always like to talk about is, if you know anybody at Conn College, tell them they're not helping very much. Instead of giving the city $1 million a year because they can, they give the city $12,000 a year, which is like, you know, not going to help much when you have a huge chunk of real estate that the city's got to support. Even though you're a nonprofit, you don't have to pay taxes. So we really need to get them off the dime. Okay, in the case of the state, we have quite a bit going on in the state. One of the things the state got hit up on recently is that Connecticut is this goes back to the first comments that we were making. Connecticut is the headline in the business section of the paper about a week or so ago was that state rated worst in the nation for hiring. You know, that's a pretty good kick in the head. Connecticut has the worst hiring environment in the nation last year, according to a new Gallup ranking of state job markets. Connecticut and Rhode Island tie for compiling the worst collective job creation scores since 2008, are the only states to have ranked in the bottom 10 each year, according to the Gallup report on the ranking posted this week. New Jersey is not far behind, ranking among the lowest states for net hiring in all but 1 year. Connecticut is consistently ranked in the bottom tier of job creation, and its position at the very bottom in 2014, along with continued low ratings of other New England states and neighboring New York, suggests that it is unlikely to change in 2015. It goes on to say, by contrast, North Dakota remained at top of the annual job market because of oil. I would guess the oil bit is toning down a bit because of the lower prices, but still, they're doing well. Other states with the best hiring environment included Texas, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, Michigan. Now, Michigan is kind of a new one. Michigan just became, not too long ago, about a year or two ago, a right-to-work state, where it was one of the biggest union states going for a long time. Now it's a right-to-work state, and it's turned out to be one of the best hiring states, in the grouping here. One of the Rust Belt states that suffered during the Great Recession is now showing one of the biggest turnarounds, Gallup said. That's about Michigan. So, it comes down to what are we going to do to get Connecticut off the dime? Well, get hiring going, you really need to have business. To get business going, you really need to have a good environment. And a good environment means you have a government and municipal, state governments that are business friendly, laws that are business friendly, and then you also got to get a grip on utilities and things like that. If your electricity is the highest in the country, you're not going to get a lot of businesses coming in. So Connecticut really needs to work hard to make things work so that your kids and your grandkids can stay in Connecticut, and you can have that Sunday dinner with 3 generations of your family. It ain't going to happen the way things are right now. Okay. Let's see. There's a lot of things on the state side that budget cuts cost breaks budget cuts cost breaks promise was the editorial thing. It says there was more to like than not to like in the 2-year budget plan unveiled by Malloy on Wednesday, a document in which the campaign promises collide with fiscal realities. The Office of Fiscal Analysis estimates that if nothing changed, Connecticut would face a deficit of $1.3 billion in fiscal year 2015-16 and $1.4 billion the following year. To close the gap, the governor is asking the legislature to abandon tax cuts that he signed earlier into law and were to begin over the next 2 years, after the election, of course. He plans to continue trimming the state labor force through attrition. He also wants to slap another tax on hospitals already reeling from his past fiscal policies. I mean, does it ever stop? I mean, the hospitals already are getting killed. They do say they might give them back some money, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the governor's budget proposal flat funds municipal aid and keeps the state committed to funding public education. Beginning his second term, Malloy deserves credit for having resisted the temptation to solve his own budget problems by transferring them to towns and cities via reductions. No, I don't think so. I mean, that's what he promised and campaigned on. He only did what he said he would do, which isn't always the case. And then that's a bunch of garbage. But transportation is also on the list of things not to like. The governor proposes a 30-year, $100 billion transportation initiative, including a $10 billion investment in state and federal funds over the next 5 years, but only spells out the funding through fiscal year 2017. After that, the cost of the transportation initiative outstrips the revenue produced by the gas tax that would be used to pay for it. Unable to produce a plan to pay for the undertaking, the governor retreated to the frequent fallback of politicians. He calls for forming a commission to figure it out. This governor and the legislature, meaning the Democrats in control, should end the practice of promising tax cuts down the road, impose them immediately, or don't bother. In other words, don't promise all these tax cuts before the election, even put them into law, and then after the election, change the laws to get rid of the tax cuts. That's what Malloy did. And then it goes on to say hospitals should be hit with hospitals would be hit with another $340 million in taxes over the next 2 years, a move the administration said would leverage $200 million in federal aid with funds returned to the hospitals. The administration broke the same promise in the past, and the legislature should reject the idea unless there are ironclad assurances to protect the hospitals. I would certainly agree with that. Then it goes on to say that the Fed funds are needed for, let's see, how much time do we got? Okay. Goes on to say Fed funds are needed for to help with the roads, but guess what? I mean, this is. I'm going to just read you some words here. Compounding the challenge confronting Connecticut and states across the country has been a curtailment of federal support. As reported in the Day Sunday, the Associated Press analysis found the amount of money available to states from the Federal Highway Trust Fund declined 3.5% during the 5-year period ending 2013. And then it goes on to say, driving this curtailment in support is the Republican fixation with austerity. In this case, it's misplaced. The United States needs to invest more in transportation infrastructure, not less. Increased spending would immediately pay dividends far in excess of the initial investments in terms of economic growth and added productivity. This is such BS. It's really, really crazy. What the real deal here is that Obama and company and the Democrats have more than doubled food stamps. They've more than doubled disabilities. They have more social type programs than you can shake a stick at. It's just they're putting all this money into entitlements, and naturally there's no money left for defense. There's no money left for infrastructure, roads. And to sit there and say the Republicans should not let that happen. Well, somebody's got to say we can't keep raising taxes, guys. We got to live within our means. Is there anybody out there that thinks they don't pay enough taxes? I mean, my gosh, it gets ridiculous. Every time you look at a paycheck and you look at how much is taken out, I mean, it's like, holy, what the heck am I working for? Sometimes it's not even worth having 2 members of the family work because you find out that the tax increases are such that you're only getting half the pay for the second person working. It gets ridiculous. So, the day when they sit there and say the federal government needs to give more money to the states for infrastructure, they ought to say in the same breath that they ought to stop giving so much money out in entitlements, especially to people that shouldn't need entitlements, because too much of it goes to people that don't want to work. And it was just like when they had the long unemployment, they ended up lots of people unemployed. They cut back the time that you could get unemployment, and guess what? Everybody went to work again that was losing their unemployment. And if you pay somebody not to work, they probably aren't going to work. So, they got to get a handle on this thing. A couple other things that are in the legislature. One of them is a suicide bill. I mean, good God, do we want to really? I guess I'm not going to be able to talk to you about the suicide bill right now. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.